Hashtag the Human Sniper. Part 1. The Krillian War Fleet emerged from hyperspace like metallic thunder, their massive ships casting shadows over the mining colony of Kepler, 442b. Admiral Zextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small human settlement through his tactical display. His four eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he observed the primitive structures scattered across the planet's surface. "These humans are even weaker than our intelligence suggested," he hissed to his second-in-command. "Look at their pathetic defenses. A few energy barriers and some basic turrets. This will be over before the sun sets." The Krillians have been expanding their empire for 3 centuries, crushing every species they encountered. Their reputation preceded them across the galaxy. Most civilizations surrendered the moment they saw a Krillian fleet on their borders. But humanity was different. When the Krillian diplomats had demanded surrender, the humans had simply said no and continued mining their precious metals. This defiance had amused Admiral Zextar at first. Humans were a young species, barely 500 years into space travel. They had no great fleets, no energy shields that could withstand Krillian weapons, and their soldiers were physically weak compared to the 8-foot-tall, armored Krillian warriors. The Admiral expected this to be another easy conquest, another planet added to their growing empire. The mining colony housed about 10,000 humans, mostly miners and their families. It wasn't a military target, but the Admiral had chosen it specifically for that reason. Breaking the spirit of a species was easier when you started with their civilians. Once the colonists were crushed, other human worlds would fall in line quickly. "Deploy the ground forces," Admiral Zextar commanded. "I want overwhelming numbers. 5,000 warriors for this tiny settlement. Let's show them the price of defying the Krillian Empire." The invasion began at dawn. Massive drop ships descended through the atmosphere, their engines roaring like thunder. Inside each ship, Krillian warriors checked their plasma rifles and energy shields. Each warrior stood 8 feet tall, with thick, scaled skin that could deflect most small arms fire. Their 4 arms allowed them to carry multiple weapons, and their natural armor made them nearly unstoppable in close combat. Captain Thexval commanded the lead assault team. He had fought in 12 planetary invasions and had never faced serious resistance. As his dropship approached the landing zone, he studied the terrain through his tactical visor. The human settlement was built in a valley, surrounded by rocky hills and dense forests. Perfect hunting grounds for his warriors. "Remember," he told his troops over the communication system, "we want some humans alive for interrogation. Kill most of them, but save a few leaders. High Command wants to understand how these primitive beings think they can stand against us." The Krillian warriors laughed at this. They had heard stories of human weakness from other conquered species. Humans had no natural armor, no venomous claws, and their lifespans were laughably short. Some warriors joked that humans would probably surrender the moment they saw a Krillian warrior up close. As the dropships landed, Captain Thexval noticed something odd. The human settlement seemed almost empty. A few figures could be seen moving between buildings, but there were no crowds of panicking civilians, no desperate attempts to flee. It was too quiet. "Scanners show minimal human activity," reported his sensor operator. "Either they're hiding underground or they've evacuated most of the population." "Cowards," Captain Thexval growled. "They probably ran the moment our ships appeared. No matter. We'll hunt them down wherever they're hiding." The Krillian warriors advanced in formation, their heavy boots crushing the human-made pathways beneath them. They moved with confidence, expecting to encounter only light resistance from poorly armed miners. Their energy shields hummed with power, ready to deflect any desperate shots from human weapons. What they didn't know was that hidden in the hills surrounding the valley, a single human watched their approach through a scope. Marcus Chun had been a sniper in the Human Colonial Defense Force for 15 years before retiring to work as a mining security officer. When the Krillian fleet had appeared, the colony's emergency plan had been activated. Most civilians were evacuated to underground shelters, while a small team of defenders remained to slow down the invasion. Marcus was the only military veteran among the defenders, and he had volunteered to take the most dangerous position. From his hiding spot on a rocky outcrop 3 kilometers from the settlement, he had a perfect view of the entire valley. His rifle was a custom-built piece, designed for extreme long-range shooting. It fired solid metal rounds at incredible velocity, capable of penetrating most forms of body armor. Through his scope, Marcus watched the Krillian warriors advance. He counted roughly 500 in the first wave, with more drop ships landing every few minutes. The aliens moved with military precision, but Marcus noticed something important. They were overconfident, bunched together in tight formations because they expected no real resistance. Big mistake, Marcus whispered to himself as he adjusted his scope for the distance and wind conditions. He had studied every piece of intelligence available about Krillian anatomy and technology. Their energy shields were designed to stop plasma and laser weapons, but nobody had tested them against old-fashioned kinetic rounds traveling at hypersonic speeds. Their natural armor was impressive, but Marcus had identified several weak points where a precisely placed shot could penetrate. The Krillian advance continued, with warriors spreading out to search the empty buildings of the settlement. Captain Fexval stood in the center of the valley, directing his troops through hand signals and radio communications. He made an impressive target, standing tall and proud, completely unaware that he was being watched. Marcus controlled his breathing, feeling his heartbeat slow as he entered the meditative state that all great snipers knew. The world around him seemed to fade away until there was only the target, the rifle, and the gentle squeeze of the trigger. He had made shots like this thousands of times during his military career, but never against an alien species that had threatened his home. The first shot was experimental, aimed at a Krillian warrior who had wandered away from the main group. Marcus wanted to test whether his rounds could penetrate their shields and armor before committing to taking out their leader. The rifle fired almost silently, thanks to advanced sound suppression technology. The round traveled 3 kilometers in less than 2 seconds, striking the Krillian warrior in the center of his chest. The energy shield flickered and failed instantly, unable to cope with the kinetic impact. The round punched through the warrior's natural armor like it was paper, dropping him instantly. The other Krillians noticed their comrades fall, but they had no idea where the shot had come from. They began looking around frantically, trying to identify the threat. Captain Fexval barked orders through his radio, demanding to know what had happened. "Sniper attack," one of his lieutenants reported. "Fextal is down. I don't see the shooter." "Impossible," Captain Fexval snarled. "Human weapons can't penetrate our shields. It must have been equipment failure." Marcus smiled grimly as he chambered another round. The Krillians had no idea what they were dealing with. He shifted his aim to another target, this one standing near a cluster of supply crates about 2 kilometers away. The second shot was as perfect as the first, dropping another warrior instantly. Now the Krillians knew they were under attack, but they still couldn't locate the source. They began taking cover behind buildings and vehicles, their overconfident advance grinding to a halt. Captain Fexval realized that his easy conquest was becoming complicated. "Spread out," he commanded. "Find that sniper. Use thermal scanners and motion detectors." But Marcus was already moving to his second position, a carefully prepared hide site 500 meters from his first location. He had spent weeks preparing multiple shooting positions, each with clear lines of sight to different parts of the valley. The Krillians could search his first position all they wanted. He would be long gone. As the alien warriors scrambled to organize a search, Marcus settled into his new position and began selecting his next targets. The Krillians were learning to spread out, but they were still predictable. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and superior technology, not guerrilla warfare against a hidden enemy. The third shot took out a Krillian who was trying to coordinate the search from behind a mining vehicle. The fourth dropped a warrior who had climbed onto a building to get a better view of the surrounding hills. Each shot was perfectly placed, and each one increased the panic among the Krillian forces. Captain Fexval was beginning to realize that he was facing something unexpected. Human weapons weren't supposed to be this effective against Krillian technology. The shots were coming from impossible distances, and whoever was shooting had incredible accuracy. This wasn't the desperate resistance of panicking civilians. This was professional warfare. "How many snipers are out there?" he demanded from his sensor operator. "I'm reading only one heat signature in the hills, sir, but it keeps moving. Whoever this is, they know the terrain perfectly." "One sniper," A single human was holding up his entire advance force and had already eliminated 4 of his warriors. Captain Thexval felt a cold realization creeping through his mind. Maybe the Krillian intelligence about human weakness was wrong. Maybe they had underestimated this species. Marcus continued his deadly work, moving between positions and taking carefully aimed shots. He wasn't trying to win the battle single-handedly. That would be impossible against 5,000 Krillian warriors. His job was to delay them, to make them cautious and afraid, to buy time for the civilians to reach safety and for reinforcements to arrive. Each shot was a message, delivered at hypersonic velocity across kilometers of space. The message was simple. Humans might be physically weaker than Krillians, but they were far from helpless. And if the Krillian Empire wanted to conquer humanity, they would have to pay a price for every meter of ground. As the sun climbed higher in the alien sky, the Krillian advance remained stalled. Their overwhelming numbers meant nothing when they couldn't even find their enemy. Captain Thexval stared up at the hills surrounding the valley, knowing that somewhere out there, a single human was making his invasion look foolish. The war was just beginning, and already the Krillians were learning their first hard lesson about humanity. Never underestimate the determination of someone defending their home. #The Human Sniper. Part 2. Captain Thexval's frustration grew with each passing hour. His advance force of 500 warriors had been reduced to cowering behind cover, afraid to move more than a few meters at a time. The invisible human sniper had claimed 12 Krillian lives, and each death had been a perfect shot from an impossible distance. "Sir, we've searched the first 3 hill positions," reported Lieutenant Caxmore. "We found some equipment traces, but the sniper was gone long before we arrived. Whoever this is, they know exactly how to stay hidden." The captain's 4 eyes burned with rage. In 12 planetary invasions, he had never been held up by a single enemy soldier. The Krillian military doctrine was built around overwhelming force and superior technology. They weren't trained to deal with this kind of patient, methodical warfare. "Deploy the hover drones," he ordered. "Full spectrum scanning. I want every rock, every tree, every shadow examined. No human can hide from our technology." Admiral Zextar's voice crackled over the communication channel. "Captain Thexval, report. Why is your advance stopped? Our orbital sensors show your forces haven't moved in 3 hours." "Sir, we're dealing with unexpected resistance," the captain replied carefully. "A human sniper has taken position in the hills. We're working to eliminate the threat." "One sniper?" The admiral's voice carried disbelief and growing anger. "You have 500 warriors, Captain. How is one primitive human stopping an entire assault force?" Captain Thexval had no good answer. The truth was humiliating. They were being outfought by a single human using what appeared to be basic kinetic weapons. Every time his warriors tried to advance, another perfect shot would drop one of them. The snipers seemed to know their positions before they moved, anticipating their tactics with uncanny accuracy. Meanwhile, Marcus Chun watched the Krillian drones through his scope from his 4th position. The small flying machines were sophisticated, equipped with thermal sensors and motion detectors. But Marcus had prepared for this possibility. His ghillie suit was lined with thermal dampening material, and his position was chosen to blend perfectly with the natural rock formations. The drones passed within 50 meters of his location, their sensors sweeping the area methodically. Marcus remained perfectly still, controlling his breathing and heart rate through meditation techniques he had learned during special operations training. To the Krillian sensors, he was just another part of the landscape. As the drones moved away, Marcus studied the Krillian forces through his scope. They were becoming more organized, setting up overlapping fields of fire and moving in smaller groups. Their tactics were improving, but they were still predictable. Military doctrine was hard to abandon, even when it wasn't working. Marcus selected his next target, a Krillian warrior who appeared to be a communications specialist, judging by the extra equipment he carried. Disrupting their coordination would slow them down even more. He adjusted his scope for wind and distance, then squeezed the trigger with practiced precision. The 13th Krillian warrior fell, and panic rippled through their ranks. Some warriors fired wildly into the hills, their plasma bolts scorching rocks and trees hundreds of meters from Marcus's position. Others demanded immediate evacuation, unwilling to advance into what felt like a death trap. Captain Thexval realized he was losing control of his forces. Krillian warriors were bred for courage and trained for combat, but they had never faced an enemy they couldn't see or fight directly. The psychological effect of a sniper was destroying their morale faster than the actual casualties. All units, maintain discipline, he barked in his radio. The human is just one soldier. We will not be intimidated by a primitive species. But, privately, Captain Thexval was beginning to question everything he thought he knew about humans. The intelligence reports had described them as weak, short-lived creatures with no significant military capabilities. Yet this single human was demonstrating skills that rivaled the best Krillian special forces. The sniper shots weren't just accurate, they were intelligent. Each target had been chosen for maximum psychological impact. Communication specialists, team leaders, warriors who showed initiative. The human was systematically destroying the chain of command and demoralizing the entire force. As afternoon turned to evening, Marcus moved to his fifth prepared position. He was beginning to feel the strain of constant movement and concentration, but he couldn't stop now. Intelligence reports suggested that Krillian reinforcements would arrive within 24 hours. He needed to buy more time for the civilian evacuation. From his new position, Marcus could see that the Krillians had finally adapted to his tactics. They were moving in smaller groups, using better cover, and coordinating their advances more carefully. It was time to change his own strategy. Instead of picking off individual targets, Marcus began focusing on equipment. His 15th shot destroyed a communications array, cutting off contact between several Krillian squads. His 16th shot punctured a fuel cell on a hover vehicle, creating a spectacular explosion that sent warriors scrambling for cover. The psychological warfare was working. The Krillians were spending more time looking over their shoulders than advancing toward their objective. Every shadow might hide the deadly sniper. Every distant rock could be a shooting position. Captain Thexval made a desperate decision. All units, charge the settlement simultaneously. Full assault from all directions. The sniper can't hit everyone at once. It was exactly what Marcus had been waiting for. As 400 Krillian warriors rose from their cover positions and began charging across the open ground, Marcus had a target-rich environment. He began firing rapidly, dropping warriors with mechanical precision. But the charge was partially successful. While Marcus could hit multiple targets, he couldn't stop the entire assault. Dozens of Krillian warriors reached the settlement buildings, expecting to find hiding civilians to use as hostages. Instead, they found more prepared positions and booby traps. The human defenders had spent months preparing for this invasion, and every building had been turned into a defensive position. Hidden explosive charges detonated as Krillian warriors entered certain buildings. Automated defense turrets emerged from concealment, firing streams of kinetic rounds. Most importantly, the settlement's defenders weren't cowering civilians. They were miners who had lived on a dangerous frontier world for years, people who knew how to fight for their survival. They might not have military training, but they had something the Krillians didn't expect: absolute determination to protect their home. The Krillian assault quickly turned into a chaotic urban battle. Warriors found themselves fighting room to room against humans who knew every tunnel, every hiding place, every tactical advantage the settlement offered. What should have been an easy conquest became a grinding, brutal fight. Marcus continued providing sniper support, but his role was changing. Instead of stopping an advance, he was now providing covering fire for the settlement defenders. Each shot was calculated to maximum effect, eliminating Krillian warriors who threatened to overwhelm defensive positions. As night fell, Captain Thexval realized his force had suffered over 60 casualties while barely making any progress. The human settlement was still under defender control, his warriors were demoralized, and the invisible sniper continued picking off targets with terrifying accuracy. Admiral Zextar, he reported over a secure channel, requesting immediate reinforcements and orbital support. The human resistance is more significant than anticipated. The Admiral's response was cold and angry. Captain, you are telling me that a mining colony of primitive humans has stopped 500 Krillian warriors. Sir, these humans fight differently than our intelligence suggested. They're using tactics we weren't prepared for, and Their weapons are more effective than expected. I don't want to hear excuses, Captain. I want that settlement captured by dawn, where you'll be explaining your failure to High Command in person. Captain Thexval knew his career was probably over, but he had bigger concerns now. His warriors were requesting evacuation. The human sniper continued to operate with impunity, and the settlement defenders showed no signs of surrender. For the first time in his military career, he was facing the possibility of actual defeat. In the hills overlooking the valley, Marcus Chun checked his ammunition supply. He was down to his last 20 rounds, and fatigue was beginning to affect his accuracy. But the civilian evacuation was nearly complete, and intelligence suggested human military reinforcements would arrive within 12 hours. He just had to hold on a little longer. As he settled into a new shooting position and selected his next target, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The Krillian Empire might have superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the fighting spirit of humanity. The war was far from over, but the first battle was proving that humans were not the weak, primitive species the aliens had expected. And every shot Marcus fired sent that message echoing across the galaxy. Hashtag the human sniper. Part 3 Dawn brought no relief for Captain Thexval. His assault force had spent the night trapped in a nightmare of guerrilla warfare, where death could come from any direction at any moment. The human sniper had claimed 23 Krillian lives, and the settlement defenders had accounted for another 37. Nearly a quarter of his force was gone, and they hadn't captured a single strategic objective. Admiral Zextar's anger crackled through the communication channel. Captain, your failure is becoming an embarrassment to the entire fleet. I'm sending down additional forces and taking direct command of this operation. Sir, with respect, additional forces might not solve the problem. Captain Thexval replied carefully. This human sniper operates unlike anything in our combat databases. He's not just accurate, he's tactically brilliant. Every shot is perfectly planned. One sniper, Captain. One primitive human with an obsolete kinetic weapon. And you're telling me he's out fighting the Krillian military? The truth was even worse than the Admiral realized. Marcus Chun wasn't just picking off random targets. He was conducting a masterpiece of psychological warfare. His shots targeted communications equipment, squad leaders, and specialists whose loss would create maximum chaos. He struck at unpredictable intervals, sometimes rapid fire, sometimes waiting hours between shots, keeping the Krillian forces in constant tension. But Admiral Zextar was beyond reasoning. His reputation was at stake, and the longer this minor operation dragged on, the more it looked like incompetence to the Krillian High Command. I'm deploying 2,000 additional warriors, the Admiral announced, and I'm authorizing the use of heavy artillery. We'll flatten every building in that settlement and turn the hills into glass. Captain Thexval felt a chill. Heavy artillery would certainly destroy the human positions, but it would also eliminate any chance of capturing valuable intelligence about human capabilities. More importantly, it would represent a massive escalation in the conflict. Sir, orbital bombardment of civilian colony might be seen as excessive force by other galactic species, he warned. Let them see, Admiral Zextar snarled. It will serve as an example of what happens when primitive species defy the Krillian Empire. Meanwhile, Marcus Chun watched the additional Krillian drop ships through his scope. 2,000 fresh warriors were deploying in the valley, along with heavy equipment that looked suspiciously like artillery pieces. The situation was about to change dramatically. He activated his emergency communication device, sending a coded message to the Human Defense Command. Krillian force escalating to heavy weapons. Need immediate evacuation of remaining personnel. Cannot hold position much longer. The response came back within minutes. Reinforcements inbound. ETA, 4 hours. Hold position at all costs. For hours. Marcus checked his ammunition again. 15 rounds left. He'd been fighting for 18 hours straight, surviving on military rations and pure determination. His body ached, his eyes burned from staring through the scope, and his hands trembled slightly from fatigue and adrenaline. But he wasn't finished yet. The Krillians were setting up their heavy weapons in what they thought were protected positions. Marcus studied their artillery through his scope, calculating distances and wind conditions. Those weapons could devastate the settlement and eliminate his hiding positions, but they had one critical weakness. They required skilled operators. His 24th shot eliminated the lead artillery specialist just as the alien was calibrating the targeting system. The massive weapon's barrel swung wildly off target, and the other operator scrambled for cover. Marcus's 25th shot took out the backup operator, effectively neutralizing the first artillery piece. Admiral Zextar watched the chaos through his orbital sensors, his rage building to dangerous levels. "How is this possible?" he roared. "How is one human stopping our entire operation?" His tactical officer provided the unwelcome answer. "Sir, our intelligence about human capabilities appears to be severely flawed. This sniper is demonstrating skills that match our elite special forces. His equipment, while primitive by our standards, is precisely suited to his tactics." "I don't care about his skills," the Admiral snapped. "Deploy the hunter-killer teams. Send our best special forces after him. I want this human dead within the hour." The hunter-killer teams were the Krillian military's elite soldiers, trained specifically for tracking and eliminating dangerous targets. Each team consisted of 4 specialists: a tracker, a spotter, a heavy weapons operator, and a close combat expert. They had never failed to eliminate a target. 3 teams landed in the hills surrounding Marcus's position, using advanced stealth technology to mask their approach. Unlike the regular infantry, these soldiers moved with patience and skill, using terrain and cover to their advantage. Marcus sensed the change immediately. The random movements of regular soldiers had been replaced by purposeful, coordinated advances. Professional warriors were hunting him now, and his amateur preparation might not be enough to escape them. He began moving constantly, never staying in one position for more than a single shot. His knowledge of the terrain became critical as he used hidden pathways and natural cover to stay ahead of his pursuers. But the hunter-killer teams were learning his patterns, predicting his movements with increasing accuracy. The psychological balance was shifting. For the first time since the battle began, Marcus felt hunted instead of hunter. The Krillian Special Forces communicated through encrypted channels, coordinated their movements with military precision, and carried weapons capable of penetrating his cover. His 26th shot eliminated a heavy weapons operator, but the return fire was immediate and accurate. Plasma bolts scorched the rocks around his position, forcing him to abandon his hide site faster than planned. The hunter-killer teams were closing in. But Marcus had one advantage the Krillians couldn't predict. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. The settlement defenders had been monitoring his situation through thermal sensors, and they were preparing their own surprise. As the hunter-killer teams converged on Marcus's position, hidden charges placed throughout the hills began detonating. The explosions weren't large enough to cause serious casualties, but they created chaos and confusion among the pursuing forces. In the smoke and noise, Marcus slipped away to a previously prepared fallback position. The settlement defenders had spent their time wisely, creating a network of hidden supply caches and escape routes throughout the hills. Marcus reached a resupply point and found fresh ammunition, food, and medical supplies waiting for him. A note attached to the supplies read, "From your friend below. Keep them busy." Admiral Zextar watched his elite forces struggle to locate a single human and felt his confidence cracking. The hunter-killer teams were supposed to end this embarrassment quickly, but they were being outmaneuvered by terrain advantages and human preparation. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving communications from neighboring systems. Word of our difficulty is spreading. Several species are requesting information about human military capabilities." This was exactly what the Admiral had hoped to avoid. The Krillian Empire's expansion depended on their reputation for invincible military power. If word spread that humans could resist Krillian forces effectively, other species might find the courage to resist as well. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," Admiral Zextar ordered. "I want that entire valley turned to ash. We'll claim the humans used nuclear weapons, and we were forced to respond." But before the Admiral could implement his desperate plan, new contacts appeared on his sensors. Human warships were approaching at high speed. Not the primitive craft intelligence had described, but sleek vessels with energy signatures that suggested advanced military technology. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the human task force that dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Her ships were smaller than the Krillian fleet, but they were built for speed and precision rather than brute force. Admiral Zextar, she broadcast on an open channel. This is Captain Mitchell of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You have attacked a civilian colony without provocation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The Admiral's response was predictably arrogant. Human vessel, you're outgunned and outnumbered. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Captain Mitchell's reply was calm and confident. Admiral, I think you should ask your ground forces how well that strategy is working for them. As if summoned by her words, Marcus's 27th shot eliminated another Krillian officer, visible to the orbital sensors as a brief energy flash in the hills. The timing was perfect, a demonstration that human resistance continued despite overwhelming odds. The psychological effect on the Krillian fleet was immediate. If one human with a primitive rifle could hold off thousands of their warriors, what could an entire fleet of military vessels accomplish? Admiral Zextar found himself facing a choice he had never expected. Escalate to total warfare against an enemy that had already proven more dangerous than anticipated, or find a way to withdraw without losing face. In the hills below, Marcus Chun settled into a new position and selected his next target. The human fleet had arrived, but the battle wasn't over yet. He still had ammunition, and there were still Krillian warriors threatening his home. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's strength lay not in superior technology or physical power, but in something the Krillians had never encountered: the absolute refusal to give up when defending what mattered most. Hashtag the human sniper. Part 4. The arrival of the human fleet changed everything. Admiral Zextar stared at his tactical displays in growing alarm as the human warships took up aggressive positions around his fleet. Their vessels were smaller than Krillian ships, but their energy signatures suggested weapons and defensive systems far more advanced than intelligence reports had indicated. Captain Sarah Mitchell's voice continued broadcasting across all frequencies. Admiral Zextar, you have 30 minutes to begin withdrawing your ground forces. Every minute you delay will result in additional consequences. The Admiral's tactical officers were reporting concerning readings from the human ships. Sir, the weapon systems are unlike anything in our databases. Energy output suggests they could penetrate our shields, and their maneuverability is superior to our vessels. Impossible, the Admiral snarled, but doubt was creeping into his voice. Human technology is primitive. Our intelligence clearly states, Sir, interrupted his communications officer. We're receiving reports from other fleet commanders throughout the sector. Humans are engaging Krillian forces at multiple locations. Early reports suggest significant resistance. The terrible truth was dawning on Admiral Zextar. The intelligence about human weakness hadn't just been wrong. It had been catastrophically incorrect. Humanity wasn't a primitive species cowering before superior forces. They were a military power that had been hiding their true capabilities until the moment of attack. On the planet below, Marcus Chun watched the standoff through his scope while maintaining pressure on the Krillian ground forces. His 28th shot eliminated a Krillian warrior who was trying to establish a new communications array. The aliens were still attempting to coordinate their scattered forces, but every successful communication attempt drew Marcus's immediate attention. The hunter-killer teams were still searching for him, but their movements had become more cautious since the orbital standoff began. The elite Krillian soldiers were beginning to realize they might need to evacuate soon, making their hunt for the sniper less urgent than their own survival. Captain Thexval found himself in an impossible position. His ground forces were demoralized under constant harassment from the invisible sniper and now potentially cut off from orbital support. The human fleet arrival had transformed what should have been an easy conquest into a potential disaster. All units, establish defensive perimeter around the landing zones, he ordered. Prepare for possible evacuation. The admission of potential retreat was devastating to Krillian morale. Warriors who had been bred for conquest were now talking about survival and escape. The psychological effect of Marcus's sniper campaign had accomplished something no human commander had dared hope. It had broken the myth of Krillian invincibility. Captain Mitchell observed the Krillian confusion through her ship's sensors and decided to increase the pressure. Admiral Zextar, your ground forces appear to be in some difficulty. Perhaps this would be an appropriate time to discuss terms for withdrawal. We do not negotiate with primitive species, the Admiral replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Primitive? Captain Mitchell's tone carried amusement. Admiral, your elite forces have been held in place for over 20 hours by a single human sniper. Your definition of primitive might need revision. To emphasize her point, she transmitted real-time footage from the planet's surface, showing Krillian warriors pinned down behind cover, while Marcus's latest shot eliminated another target. The imagery was devastating to Krillian pride. Their supposedly superior warriors reduced to cowering behind obstacles by one human with an obsolete kinetic weapon. Admiral Zextar's rage was reaching dangerous levels. The humiliation of his ground forces was bad enough, but being mocked by human commanders was intolerable. Enough. All ships, prepare for bombardment of the human fleet. We'll settle this with superior firepower. But as the Krillian ships powered their weapons, the human vessels responded with a demonstration of their own capabilities. Captain Mitchell's flagship fired a single, precise shot that disabled the Krillian fleet's primary communication array without causing casualties. That was a warning shot, Admiral, she announced. The next one won't miss anything vital. The message was clear. The human ships could strike with surgical precision whenever they chose. The Krillian advantage in numbers was meaningless if their opponents could disable their systems at will. Admiral Zextar's tactical officer provided the analysis he didn't want to hear. Sir, the human vessels are demonstrating technological superiority in targeting, maneuverability, and defensive systems. Recommend immediate withdrawal to preserve the fleet. The Admiral's entire worldview was crumbling. Everything the Krillian Empire believed about human weakness was proving false. Their easy conquest had become a potential military disaster, and retreat was beginning to look like the only rational option. On the planet below, Marcus Chun was facing his own crisis. His ammunition was down to 7 rounds, and the hunter-killer teams had triangulated his general position. Fatigue was affecting his accuracy, and he knew he couldn't maintain this pace much longer. But reinforcement was finally arriving. Human dropships were descending through the atmosphere, carrying real military forces to relieve the settlement defenders. The colonial marine units were equipped with modern weapons and armor, trained for exactly this kind of defensive operation. Marcus's 29th shot provided covering fire for the landing operation, eliminating a Krillian warrior who was trying to coordinate an attack on a human landing zone. His 30th shot disabled a piece of Krillian equipment that could have threatened the incoming dropships. The arrival of human military forces transformed the ground situation immediately. Instead of scattered miners and a single sniper holding defensive positions, the Krillians now faced professional soldiers with coordinated tactics and advanced equipment. Captain Fexval watched the human reinforcements deploy and realized the situation had become hopeless. His warriors were demoralized, his equipment was damaged, and now he faced a numerically superior enemy with better knowledge of the terrain. All units, withdraw to landing zone Alpha, he ordered. Prepare for emergency evacuation. The retreat was exactly what Marcus had been fighting to achieve. As Krillian warriors abandoned their positions and fell back toward their landing zones, the human settlement was finally secure. The civilian evacuation could be completed, and the immediate threat was over. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. He had 3 rounds remaining, and he intended to make them count. His 31st shot eliminated a Krillian officer who was trying to coordinate the retreat. His 32nd shot destroyed a piece of communications equipment, further disrupting their withdrawal. For his 33rd and final shot, Marcus selected a target with special significance. Captain Fexval himself. The Krillian commander was standing near his command vehicle, directing the evacuation with obvious frustration. Marcus adjusted his scope for the final time, compensating for wind and distance. This shot was personal payment for the attack on innocent civilians, for the threat to his home, for the arrogance of an empire that thought humans were too weak to fight back. The round traveled 3 kilometers in less than 2 seconds, striking Captain Fexval center mass. The Krillian commander's energy shield failed instantly, and his natural armor provided no protection against the hypersonic impact. He fell without a sound, becoming the final casualty of Marcus's incredible campaign. In orbit, Admiral Zextar watched his ground forces collapse and realized that continued resistance was pointless. The humans had demonstrated superior technology, tactical skill, and fighting spirit. Prolonging the engagement would only result in additional casualties and further humiliation. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump," he ordered reluctantly. "We're withdrawing from this system." Captain Mitchell allowed them to leave without pursuit, knowing that sometimes the most powerful victory was the one that didn't require total destruction. The Krillian fleet departed in defeat, carrying with them the knowledge that humanity was not the weak species they had expected. As the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace, Marcus Chun finally allowed himself to rest. He had fired 33 shots over 24 hours, eliminated 33 Krillian warriors, including their ground commander, and held off an invasion force of thousands until reinforcements could arrive. But, more importantly, he had sent a message that would echo throughout the galaxy. Humans would defend their homes with skill, determination, and absolutely no mercy for those who threatened innocent lives. The Krillian Empire's easy expansion had come to a sudden and devastating halt, stopped by the rifle of a single human sniper who refused to give up when it mattered most. Hashtag the Human Sniper. Part 5. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler, 442b, the galaxy had changed forever. The story of Marcus Chun, the human sniper who held off an entire Krillian invasion force, had spread through every star system and alien civilization. What had started as a routine conquest by an expanding empire had become the spark that ignited the largest galactic war in centuries. Admiral Zextar stood before the Krillian High Command, his career in ruins and his reputation destroyed. The defeat at Kepler, 442b, had been just the beginning of a series of military disasters as other species found the courage to resist Krillian expansion. "Explain to us," demanded Supreme Commander Veldar, "how our Empire's greatest fleet was humiliated by a single human with primitive weapons." "The intelligence was wrong," Admiral Zextar replied, his voice hollow with defeat. "Everything we believed about human capabilities was incorrect. They're not a weak, primitive species. They're a military power that was hiding their true strength." The Supreme Commander's 4 eyes burned with rage. "One sniper, Admiral, one human soldier stopped our invasion and inspired half the galaxy to rebel against us. Because of your failure, we're facing coordinated resistance across 17 systems." The truth was even worse than the Supreme Commander realized. Marcus Chun had become a symbol throughout the galaxy, proof that the mighty Krillian Empire could be defeated by courage and skill. Alien species that had submitted to Krillian rule were rising in revolt, inspired by the story of one human who refused to surrender. On Earth, Marcus sat in a military briefing room, surrounded by generals and admirals who wanted to understand how he had accomplished the impossible. His simple explanation frustrated them. "I did my job. I protected my home. Anyone would have done the same." But it wasn't that simple, and everyone in the room knew it. Marcus's sniper campaign had been a masterpiece of tactical warfare, combining perfect marksmanship with psychological operations and terrain advantage. Military academies throughout human space were already studying his techniques. "Marcus," said General Harrison, the commanding officer of Colonial Defense Forces, "we need to understand your methodology. The Krillians are regrouping, and they'll be back with better tactics and equipment." "They'll be back," Marcus agreed, "but they'll never underestimate us again. And that's going to make them vulnerable in different ways." Captain Sarah Mitchell, who had commanded the fleet that broke the Krillian blockade, leaned forward in her chair. "Explain." Marcus pulled up a tactical display showing the battle site. "The Krillians fight with overwhelming force because they've never faced real resistance. Their entire military doctrine is based on intimidation and superior technology. But when that doesn't work, they don't have backup plans. They tried to adapt," pointed out Colonel Barnes. "Those hunter-killer teams were professional soldiers." "They were," Marcus acknowledged. "But they were hunting one sniper in terrain I knew perfectly with supplies and support from the settlement defenders. The Krillians couldn't adapt fast enough because they don't understand guerrilla warfare. General Harrison studied the tactical analysis. So you're saying their strength is also their weakness? Exactly. The Krillian Empire expanded by conquering civilizations that fought conventional battles against superior forces. They don't know how to deal with asymmetric warfare, and they certainly don't understand human psychology. The psychological aspect was crucial. Humans had proven they would fight to the death for their homes and families, something the Krillian military doctrine couldn't quantify or counter. Fear was a weapon that worked both ways, and Marcus had turned it against an enemy that expected easy victory. News reports were already showing the galactic impact of the battle. On Kepler 442b, the settlement had been rebuilt and expanded, becoming a symbol of human determination. Volunteers from across human space were arriving to help with construction and defense, while military engineers worked on new fortifications. The mining colony that had been a target for easy conquest was now the most heavily defended civilian settlement in the sector. Multiple defense platforms orbited the planet, and the hills where Marcus had conducted his sniper campaign were dotted with concealed weapon emplacements. But the real change was happening across the galaxy. The Altarian Republic, which had been paying tribute to the Krillian Empire for decades, had declared independence and successfully fought off a punitive expedition. The Centauri Federation was forming a military alliance with humanity. Even species that had never been conquered were building new defense networks in preparation for Krillian retaliation. Supreme Commander Veldar stood in his command center, watching tactical displays that showed Krillian forces retreating from multiple systems. The empire that had been expanding for centuries was suddenly contracting, losing territory and influence at an alarming rate. Status report, he demanded from his intelligence chief. Sir, we've lost control of 12 systems in the past month. Rebellion is spreading faster than we can respond. Our forces are being defeated by tactics they've never encountered before. All inspired by one human sniper, the Supreme Commander growled. Yes, sir. The humans have shared their tactical data with allied species. Guerrilla warfare, sniper tactics, asymmetric operations, techniques that counter our traditional advantages. The Supreme Commander realized that the Krillian Empire faced an existential threat. Their military supremacy was based on technological superiority and overwhelming force, but humans had proven those advantages could be neutralized by superior tactics and unbreakable will. Prepare the Devastator fleet, he ordered. If we can't defeat them through conventional conquest, we'll resort to complete annihilation. The Devastator fleet was the Krillian Empire's ultimate weapon. Massive dreadnoughts capable of destroying entire planets. They had never been used against a major civilization, serving instead as a deterrent against rebellion. But intelligence about the Krillian superweapons reached human command within hours. The galaxy-spanning communication network that carried Marcus's story also carried military intelligence, and humanity was preparing for the ultimate confrontation. Marcus Chun stood on the rebuilt walls of the Kepler 442b settlement, looking up at the stars where humanity's future would be decided. His single rifle had started a war that would determine whether freedom could survive against tyranny in the galaxy. Do you think we can win? Asked Sarah Chun, his daughter, who had arrived with the reconstruction volunteers. Marcus considered the question carefully. We already won the important battle, he said finally. We proved that humans don't surrender when it matters. The rest is just details. The Krillian Empire was mobilizing its deadliest weapons for a final campaign of extermination. Humanity and its new allies were preparing for the greatest battle in galactic history. The outcome would determine whether freedom or tyranny ruled the stars. But in the hills, overlooking a small mining settlement, a single sniper's rifle lay in its case, cleaned and ready. Marcus Chun had fired 33 shots that changed the galaxy forever, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapons were courage, skill, and the absolute refusal to give up. The war that had started with one human sniper holding off an invasion force was about to reach its climax. And somewhere in the vastness of space, other humans were preparing to follow Marcus's example, ready to defend their homes with the same determination that had made the Krillian Empire finally understand the true meaning of human strength. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. That lesson had been delivered at hypersonic velocity, one perfectly aimed shot at a time.